Welcome in. I'm Jeremy Siegel from Pro Sound Effects. I'm here to talk about how to build a high-performance audio team in 2025. And I'm joined by esteemed guests, veterans with much experience. We have Paul Nicholson here, who's a former SVP of Production and Operations at Showtime Networks. Now owns his own consulting company, working with clients in the media and entertainment and advertising spaces. And we have Kirk Wheeler, who's the senior manager of recording operations at LinkedIn. And really excited to have you both here. Awesome. Yeah. So quickly, why don't you guys kick us off? Just give a quick intro and sort of a background about your experience and specifically related to how you became a manager of audio and media teams. So Kirk, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I didn't start off dreaming of being a manager. I'll just say that up front. I fell in love with sound and audio from a young age. Spent a lot of my career inside of music, film, TV, advertising, and now at LinkedIn. I was mixing in Los Angeles. I was at a post-production house that did a lot of work with Netflix and Disney on their internationalization of product. And that team just kept growing. And so they were looking for people to help lead the team. And that's how I ended up stepping into the management role. And at first it was a bit of a hybrid. And then I just went full time. And then in my time at LinkedIn, it's mostly been managing teams. So yeah, a little bit about me.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, similarly, I was originally a musician. I guess you're always a musician. You're never sort of not a musician, right? Even if you don't play anymore, you're still considered a musician. But I, grew up playing the saxophone, and started out in grade school and actually wound up studying that in college at Five Towns College on Long Island, and then out to Manhattan School of Music for some classes there. And I sort of had this epiphany at some point that I just didn't want to be a starving musician. Right? I saw all these guys that were super talented that maybe were in it for the love of the music, and I just sort of had this moment of realization one day at an audition where that just wasn't me. So I decided to quit school, continued with my sort of original rock band that I was in at the time, but I got into DJing, and then I started studying engineering, audio engineering and recording. So I started producing bands, producing my own band and then other bands, and started sort of living that studio life like I'm living right now behind me, virtually. And then I sort of had another epiphany at that point where it was sort of the same thing, right? Like audio engineering and recording in the music business is similar to being the musician yourself. You're sort of living almost the same sort of parallel life. So I found myself actually spending more time designing CD covers for the artists that I was recording, and spending pulling overnighters, learning Photoshop and Quark Express at the time, and these different graphic applications. And this sort of led me down this graphic designer path where I then kind of went into the advertising business, doing retouching and design work for ad agencies, which led me eventually to Showtime, where I became and ultimately worked my way up to the SVP of Production and Technology and Operations there, and oversaw all of the video post and pre-production. We had built out recording studios and did a lot of voiceover work and a lot of promo mixing and audio engineering in that sense.
Yeah, really cool. I mean, that's such a common thread that I see with everybody in the industry, whether it's whether you're still working in a music capacity or fully in post-production. Everybody starts as a musician. I mean, you can see I have all my toys behind me, and I like to think I'm still an active musician, and I play a gig every once in a blue moon to remind myself that. But at the end of the day, same exact path for me, where I realized I needed to have something a little bit more stable that I could rely on, and ended up going back to school and found my way to Pro Sound Effects, and it's been a great experience that way. So that's really interesting that you both have that background. No surprises there either.
It was amazing hearing your journey, Paul. It's very, very similar to mine. I was a trumpet player in college, went to University of North Texas to study jazz. So yeah, I hear you on all those fronts for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I saw an interesting soundbite actually earlier today about how the best managers aren't people. I think it was actually a Steve Jobs quote Like you can't, there are people who want to be managers, but the best managers are the ones who don't really want to be managers. They're great individual contributors. So people with robust domain knowledge who just, because their skills are so indispensable, the best way to build that team is to train people to do it your way and to, kind of do it, become a proxy of your skills as an individual contributor. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, what are some key characteristics you would say of a high performance team in audio and media production? Paul, you can start this time.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. Because there's a little bit of magic in there, right? Like there's no exact formula to creating a team such as that. But I think, diversity in skill set, diversity in background is huge for this, right? Like you say, some people are musicians, some aren't, so everybody took a different path to get there. If you have kind of all the same type, you're probably not as good a team ultimately. And so that for sure. Collaboration and opening up the transparency in the process is huge, right? So and it's not just about like keeping your audio team with the audio guys and keeping the video team with the video guys and so on and so forth. It's like you got to get everybody mixing really well and exchanging ideas and techniques and thoughts about the creative process. So some of that, I don't know, Kirk.
Yeah.
I think you're spot on the diversity, right? Just like from thought, from opinion. But I think for that to become high performing, you're right on too. It's trust, right? It's just like, do we trust each other? Can people speak their mind openly? All of those things. One of the things I was actually just really reminded of this recently. So I'm at LinkedIn Learning, and we have a bunch of instructors come on, and they're kind of teaching people all the skills that they've learned over a lifetime. And we just had Dan Pink in the studio last week, and he's written a couple of amazing books. But one of the books I read early on in my management was called Drive. And I was just trying to learn about what this is. And he talks about 3 things that people need, and it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I think if you're able to get a team that has those 3 things, and you're as a manager able to give them that, right, that autonomy, not all managers do this well. But if they have that purpose and then they're feeling a sense of mastery over their craft, I think that's just that's a recipe for success.
Yeah, that's awesome. So where does the rest come from? So mastery, that's, people bringing their skills, and we want to foster them into continuing to develop those. Does the purpose come from sort of on high, as a manager? Is that something that it's your job to instill?
It's a really good question. I think it depends on the organization, right? So I'll just use the example of LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a mission to connect the world's professionals and help them be more successful. And so if we're showing up to do that, I can always point to that as a signal. However, if I was working on a film with a director, I'd be like, hey, director, what's your vision for this film? How's this going to impact people's lives? Right. All the way to an ad. Maybe Paul, you can speak to that, but just like, what's the purpose of this ad? Is it to sell more product? Is it to make somebody smile, to build brand awareness? As long as you're kind of like have that purpose in mind and you can point people to it, I think they'll, rally around that common idea.
Yeah, sort of the other sort of fourth leg to that is positive reinforcement, right? In terms of being a good manager and having a successful team, people need to feel good about the work that they're doing. And I think something that doesn't happen enough in this field, in production in general, is celebrating your success, right? Celebrating the positive things. Everybody's knocking on your door the minute something goes wrong in this industry, but nobody is knocking on your door for the 4,000 other things you did that morning and that you got right. And so it's really incumbent on the manager of a team to really reinforce that the positive reinforcement is huge. And just to throw a book on the pile of books that we're building here, there's a great management book called ZAPP, Z-A-P-P. It's a really goofy little management technique book, but it's all about positive reinforcement. And I used to make, whenever I promoted somebody to be a manager of people for the first time in their career, I'd buy them this book and I'd make them read. It's a little tiny book, but it's a good one.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'll check that out.
Nice.
Yeah. It's interesting. Because I think the purpose that comes from the brand identity. That's classic, like Simon Sinek's start with why concept of, your brand has to have a purpose and a mission. And then this concept of everybody kind of staying on the tracks with that. The wins, celebrating wins concept, Paul, is huge. That's something that I think everybody experiences, for better or for worse, in both directions. And how do you think goal setting comes into play with that? Is that something where you can set yourself up for wins and micro wins along the way if you're setting the right types of goals?
I think so. I mean, I'm big into goal setting myself, just like personal goals and also, departmental and business goals. We had a very good and lengthy process at Showtime to do that. And so as my sort of post Showtime life, I'm doing that as well. A couple of clients right now that I'm working with. I think it's a great thing because it gives you something to measure against ultimately, and then to do a big celebration of your success up the chain, right? So if you forecast out what you're trying to accomplish, and then you've actually accomplished that or beat that, you can take that up the ladder and make sure that senior level people know, about all of that success along the way. Because, you never really, when you're celebrating successes, and what I was saying earlier is like more about in the team, right? But you're not knocking on your boss's door every 5 minutes saying, we did something good, right? Then you're just the annoying guy, right? But when you do set the goals and you beat goals and he's bought in or she's bought into those goals, then you can go prove or show, I should say, how you've achieved more than that or did really good work.
Yeah. I think we could do a whole other conversation on the concept of managing up and how to get your boss to believe that you've done a great job. That's a different topic. Moving on. What do you think has changed the most? Obviously things are constantly changing, but this year, 2024, what do you think has changed the most in terms of how teams are working in audio and media production? Kirk, why don't we start with you?
Can I just start with AI because that's what everybody's gonna
sure.
right? Like, I think that's just gonna be the conversation right now.
Sure.
We're definitely in a time of just like disruption and massive change for this whole industry. I think with any change, there's always a lot of fear, but I think there's also tons of opportunity. And so I'm somebody who definitely falls into the camp of let's look at what the opportunities are here, and be really aware of the challenges and what everybody's fears are. But I think we can lead through it positively. And so I'm seeing just the number of tools available for creators just exploding, right? It's hard to keep up. I started on the Gen AI path a couple of years ago and I've been trying to follow everything. And now it's nearly impossible. You almost need like a newsletter to highlight the newsletter that are highlighting the tools, right? It's just like so much, but there have been some standouts. We can go into specific things, but I would say for me, just like the landscape changing dramatically for all the new tools coming out is probably the biggest thing, along with like some of the creative disruption that's happening broader in the industry. Some people are struggling for work. There's a change in how much content is being produced. Actually, I wouldn't say that entirely. I'd say the types of content are being produced because a lot of that content's moving to like YouTube or to other platforms. But the traditional industry is challenged at the moment. So, Paul?
Yeah, for sure. AI is like sort of like glad we buzzed in on that one because, I think, what's really funny about AI is that AI can actually help you create an AI tool. So, right, it's like you can code your own tools using AI. So it's like exponentially growing every day. To your point, there's so many tools. It's like overload. I remember there was probably 5 or 10 years ago now, there was a chart that floated around with every logo from every like marketing operations type of brand, right? And it was like, it showed like there were 5 and now there's 5,000. I can't even imagine what that would look like for AI tools and plugins and all of these little extensions that you can use. And they're amazing, right? Like it's incredible what you can do to eliminate some of that mundane, drudgery that you have to do on a daily basis, even just taking meeting notes, like, record this video podcast here and in 5 seconds you'll have a summary of everything that was relevant that means anything. So So yeah, for sure that, and to your point, I think post-pandemic business has changed so much, right? There's so much consolidation. There's so many people out there looking for jobs right now from this business of media and media production, because all the big studios have gone through just like series of downsizings and whatnot, and they're just figuring out new ways to work, and ultimately they're trying to figure out how to make money in this business anymore, because the consumers are behaving differently post-pandemic also with their consumption of all of this content that we've been creating all of these years. There was just this huge explosion in content, and then everybody started, on the consumer side, started saying it's too much. It's too much. I'm not willing to pay that much for this. So it's kind of coming back to reality, I think, and the rebound effect of that is impacting everybody. So I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Can I jump in on one thought that you started off with? I love is this empowerment of people being able to create things easier than ever. I'll use one quick example of a tool. I'll go tool specific. Actually, multiple tools, but for noise reduction in audio, like cleaning up, whether you're doing sound effects, right? You got to clean up your raw, or if you're doing voiceover, whatever it is. Multiple tools have come online, but as I dug deeper into a couple of them, a lot of them are from single developers. So it's just one person who read all the papers, learned to code, and previously that would have taken a team of like years, and it's taking one person 3 to 6 months to build this amazing tool that does incredible work. I think we're gonna see more and more of that. So
yeah, I've definitely noticed that with like really specific, single job specific tools. Oftentimes it's just a person who, this is a big problem in my life and I'm going to solve it now.
Yeah, and literally solve it now, right? Like I have this problem this morning, and by the afternoon I've developed a tool to help me solve that one problem. It didn't take me a year with a corporate approval to spend $1 million on an application and have it integrated. It's like, I had this thing and I can literally code it.
Yeah.
No time.
Yeah, that's amazing. So besides, so you mentioned a couple. I'm also a huge fan of the AI note taker for meetings. It's like, it's changed the game in terms of also just being able to be present with people and not constantly just scribbling notes. That's my best feature for that. And we mentioned some noise reduction stuff. From a team perspective, are there any tools AI wise that you've rolled out or seen people rolling out that are helping teams to work more collaboratively, more efficiently? We'll go Kirk on this one.
Sure. It's a mixed thing for us. Part of it is being part of LinkedIn. We have like an opportunity to experience the Microsoft suite of products. And so a lot of the, like, whether it's Copilot, whether it's like you're mentioning, like the team notes, we're definitely taking advantage of that. And then on the automation front, we're building a lot of pipelines, but we're also being really cautious on some of the newer tools in production specifically. So things like Adobe Firefly or 11 Labs, generation. We're exploring them. We're just seeing what's working, but we're also trying to be aware of the whole environment. It's interesting. This comes back to like the way I talked about teams, but trust is a huge thing for us. So if we're going to use things in products, what does disclosure look like? That's something we're really concerned about. Not everyone is. So if you're in a different industry or working in a different product suite, like maybe totally fine. But we're finding lots of those little gains from automation, and even things like computers getting faster continually, right? Apple just launched the M4. Like this acceleration in speed and processing on things that I would just call automation, not even AI, are getting exponentially faster and better too. So that's been a huge win for our team.
Yeah, it's interesting. And something you said, it made me think of, you mentioned the Microsoft suite of tools, this concept of, if you're at a big enough company, actually that company developing in-house tools. I remember, Paul, at the creative operations show that I saw you at earlier this year, we had the guys from Nickelodeon talking about this whole pipeline of like asset management that Paramount made in-house completely from scratch just to help them find stuff. And that's like totally proprietary. Like that's an interesting use of AI that we've seen that's already kind of making practical landfall, but it's really kind of insular. It's not available to the public, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The like custom tools, I think there's a huge future in that, right? Like an immediate future in like really bespoke tools for your business and your use case and the problem, as we were saying before, the problem you're trying to solve today. In terms of rolling things out for me, like a lot of the same, right? You try not to be distracted by shiny things and go down the path of every new tool that pops up on your radar. You try to stick with the big ones, right? Obviously, Adobe Firefly, Midjourney's great. I mean, we've rolled that out for creative teams at a few clients now, just getting them really familiar with how to prompt and get the output that they want there. Nothing's really being used in real actual production, I would say. Like, it's certainly nothing complete. Maybe bits and pieces where you're maybe generating a background and you're superimposing some stuff on top of it, or things like that. I think some runway video has made it into real things, but I think just generally, not that it's not possible, because it certainly is, and there are some people doing some outrageous things using footage from runway and other tools like in Midjourney and whatnot. But I think the brands they're apprehensive, right? The lawyers are nervous. It's all the making sure we have the indemnification, and is this real? Afraid of being sued. So right now, I would say it's still far majority being used for ideation and concept presentation and things of that sort. Nothing really other than the automation, right? Like so using tools like that companies like Adobe put out to automate versioning. Yes, absolutely, that's happening every day, everywhere I go. But some of the higher concept stuff, not necessarily yet in live production.
Yeah, that's true.
I would add something if that's okay. The loop that you just talked about, speeding up your creativity, I think that's where there's huge gains. Just the ability to prompt something, and either in Midjourney or Firefly, wherever you are, is see the result. You may use a different tool, or you may go, film something, or even like the text to sound effects, right? Tools that are out there. You can just like ideate around something. I might just want to try 10 things pretty quickly without having to go search, or I want to layer something and I kind of know what's in my head without recording it. So I think you can just get really fast iteration in a way that just wasn't possible, even from your ideas. Like, I'm a huge fan of Claude and ChatGPT, and I'll use them just for my own thinking. If I've got a thought and I'm like, validate it, there's like, what am I missing here? And that just is speeding everything up. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, we talk a lot about, and if you follow me on LinkedIn, I talk a lot about just sort of creativity, as do you, Kirk, and the concept of just like, where do you find inspiration? Where do you the creative spark comes from somewhere, and it can come at any moment. And the idea that there's this new concept and category of tools out there that is capable of being an assistant to that creative process, and just being something that you can bat ideas off of, and just actually hearing that teams are using something like Midjourney or Runway in, not necessarily in production, but as part of the creative process, just to like get ideas. That is kind of a revelation. I mean, we never had anything like that before, right? I mean, you had a tape recorder you could say ideas to, and then come back to them later. And then you had you could in a DAW, you could start just like making as many ideas as you want. But now you have something that is just on the fly, as fast as you can type thoughts out. You can now put ideas down and let that inspire whatever the production ends up being. Would you say, I mean, do you think that is, well, it's definitely here to stay and it's going to evolve, but I mean, is that the biggest innovation in creativity that we've seen, in our generation?
I think so. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and what do they say? It's like AI is as bad as it ever will be today, right? It's like, or however you say that.
Yeah.
It's only getting better, right? It's like when Steve Jobs used to come out and say, "This is the fastest Mac we've ever made." Well, it better be. It's the newest.
Right.
But yeah, I think so. I think this is. I don't know. I mean, some people compare this to the light bulb. talk about innovation, right? We haven't yet scratched the surface on what this thing is capable of, but I don't think it's going to replace humans. I mean, I think it will replace some jobs, of course, right? But not, but it'll create others. And so it's, from a creative and production standpoint, I mean, creativity is such a human talent. I'm not sure we ever get there with the machine, but some people argue the other way.
I think you're right. It's a massive step change. I think so many things about this. I've really all I've been thinking about for probably 2 years is how this will change human creativity, from writing to filming to photography to any of the elements we're thinking about. Sound, we haven't even talked about like Suno or music or like some disruption in that space. But I think it all comes back, and I believe this super deeply, to story and craft are always going to be really, really important, and the intention behind what you're creating. And I do think of these as tools, even if they become super highly advanced. And it's like, I have another partner here that can do almost everything I can do. Thinking of like something like co-intelligence, right? I think that's a book that just came out around this idea. But I still think the intention of what you're trying to make, the emotion you're trying to share, is what's going to be really relevant. And I don't think that's going to change. So that was probably where I put that. I think, yes, it's a massive change, but like it also reverts us back to like, you have to be really, really sincere and intentional about what you're trying to make. And if you can do that and tell a great story, you're still going to have success.
It reminds me of like, you see these movies that come out every couple of years that have like the most ridiculous cast, like all like 20 A-listers, and the story, is just kind of trite. And you made me, it's one of these movies you may never have heard about. And then you're scrolling on Netflix and you're like, what is this movie? It came out 8 years ago. I never heard of it. And it ends up, it's because they go for all flash and there's just not a lot of substance to it, or, whatever it might be. At the end of the day, good writing is good writing. And those are the shows that really land with people when you're talking about like streaming, all your options on streaming. Similar concept. AI, I think, will get really, really, really good at a lot of things, but just thinking about how great writing has to be, how great creativity has to be to truly break through. And so many really talented humans are doing it all the time and still not, kind of breaking through at the highest level and the largest scale with those creative projects. So I just think the stakes are so high that that's the natural resting place for this suite of tools, is as a companion. And, it's still going to take masters of craft and masters of creativity to make the content that people are going to want to engage with the most. We're competing for eyeballs so much constantly. So if you come off as anything but sincere, that's just going to hurt engagement and ultimately not land the message, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because like even things like ChatGPT, right? Like you prompt ChatGPT and essentially what it's giving you back is what it thinks you want, right?
Right.
It's not an original thought necessarily, but it's sort of like the next thing you might have typed. So you can see a world where in a television show, like ChatGPT could potentially write an episode, the next episode of a show, if you fed it every script from every episode prior, right? It could give you something that would be probably somewhat obvious plot-wise, not necessarily overly creative, but maybe if you asked it to give you a twist of some sort, it could come up with what it thinks is a twist, right? But it's not going to invent a new series that is going to break through in a way that's so unexpected when a new series comes out, right? Like for us, like when a human creates a plot line for a movie or a series or a serial, that's where I think it's going to fall short.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that might happen is I've been using this phrase a lot around people I know, called containers of expression. And what I mean by that is like a movie is a container of expression. A song is, a book is, like everything is just like a way we've created as humans of like how to express an idea. And I think we're going to see more of those. I think we're going to see more containers for that. The idea of what a movie is may change. It may become more like a video game. I've been using this example if you were going to tell the story of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? And you were Disney, you were going to say, okay, we're going to tell that story. You're going to find a great director. You're going to, find some great animators. You're going to sound design it. And we're going to have to get a budget. We're going to have to, we're going to go through the whole production process we're all used to. Well, what if I said, actually, you know what? I'd really like to have the ability to switch perspectives from any one of the bears, or maybe Goldilocks, or maybe Goldilocks mom. Like, what would this, and you could do that because we're going to have this like other way of creating things that I think will just lead naturally to different modes of creation. Not to get like too crazy about it, but I think over like a decade or two, you're going to see these kinds of changes, and we'll just find new ways of telling stories.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. Switching gears, back to teams and team building, but also related to kind of tech and trends and stuff. So like next year, what are the biggest trends that managers are keeping in mind for 2025? And what are the kind of biggest challenges that you're hoping to be able to solve next year?
Across all teams, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, across the teams that you're managing.
Yeah. I don't think we've solved this hybrid world that we live in yet, to be honest with you, especially as managers. I think it's really hard to manage teams remotely unless you're in a very task-based sort of business where you're, doing the same kind of work over and over again every day, and you can really track that exactly metrics-wise. It's hard to make sure that people are staying focused, that they're not distracted by things at the home. It's hard to shift gears and having people in the office and then not in the office, and combating that piece of it. So I do think that we have to figure this out, and also, by the way, the fact that every company does it differently is really hard in business, because where I am right now, we're here 4 days a week, but like the companies that I'm talking to aren't. And so which number do I call? And like some of that hasn't been figured out, right? So you wind up sending a lot of slower communication, or getting a lot of slower communication, depending on if you're not in sync with that partner company. So there's a lot of just challenges around that. The tech of it all has been mostly solved at this point. I think, I can have an editor working anywhere, whether they're home, in the office, anywhere. They can plug in, they're virtualized, they're cloud-based, right? And the files are in the right places. That stuff is pretty much solved. But the human aspect, I feel like, is a real challenge still. I don't know. How do you feel, Kirk?
Yeah, I totally feel the hybrid change. I think it'll continue to evolve and develop. I've talked to a lot of people around here about coming out of the pandemic. What does that look like? What's the best way to handle it? Is it 3 days? Is it 4 days? Is it pick your, you're only fully remote? We have a combination of that where I'm working. One of the things I think you lose the opportunity for if you're, don't have some in-person interaction is the mentorship piece. The ability to in audio to walk up to some speakers and be in the same room and say, oh yeah, how's that sound? I'm not sure. Here's what I'm hearing. And the real-time interaction of that, whether you're in video or graphics or whatever, just point at something is lost. And all the tools that we've created so far don't really solve for that, I don't think, in a great way. At the same time, there's times if I was mixing and I just I knew I've got 16 hours of mixing ahead of me and I just need to be heads down or put on some headphones or get on some speakers. Yeah, and I trust my team to do that. So I'm yeah, of course, do that at home. You don't have to be right here. But if you're bringing on a new team member, I think that's a challenge. I think the other thing that will be a challenge for people the next year, probably 18 months, maybe decade, is managing the pace of change and managing people's expectations of change, because I think it's going to accelerate, and just trying to keep people grounded in some sense of hey, here's why we're here, here's what we're doing. And the old CEO of LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner, would say this, and it was the first thing that resonated with me. It's once you're trying to get a message across, you feel if you say it once or twice, or you've said it to at least everybody on the team or the wider teams, that they've heard it. And the truth is, until you're kind of sick of saying something over and over and over, that's about the time that people are starting to hear it for the first time. And that was the lesson I took away. So I feel I'm repeating myself a lot in my own head, but I feel sometimes I'm like saying that for the first time to somebody because they're hearing it. And so I think just as a manager, being able to continually do that, to reassure people, to listen carefully to like their concerns that you may not think is a concern, but they may deeply feel something differently than you, and just being open to that in this time, I think would be super important.
It's really funny because as you were saying, I was thinking like one client that I'm working on is a major streaming company, television streaming company, and they're trying to shift all of their production workflow to in-house. So they're missing the over-the-shoulder opportunity to collaborate with that audio engineer or that video editor, and this is all in promotion, right? And so we're working really hard on proving the case of how much money we can save to bring all of that in-house, right? And then on another client, it's all about like, how do we work more collaboratively in this remote and hybrid world? So like they're trying to embrace that. The other one is trying to shut it down. And neither is wrong, by the way, right? Because there is something really to that over the shoulder collaboration in person. But I think the struggle is finding consistent, frequent ways of achieving that when you're working in a hybrid world, right? So like I was saying, like some days you're in the office, some days you're out of the office. So how do we work together on Tuesdays versus Wednesdays, right? And why, and how is that, and how that's different. So, and then people wind up coming in and they go, what am I doing here? Because we're not collaborating. We're not doing anything today. All I'm doing is sitting at my cubicle doing nothing. But then the next day happens to be the day you get that client feedback and you need to collaborate over that, that piece of audio, whatever it is. And you can't because you're both sitting in your kitchens, So it's like we haven't really figured this out. But yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, that seems tough. I mean, we're PSC, we're totally remote. We do stuff in person on occasion that's very intentional and pre-planned. But I can imagine, for a company that has a big, office space and there's a desire, with this, with work-life balance post-pandemic to have this. Hybrid. I want to work from home a couple of days a week type vibe. I can see those being really, really big challenges. And Kirk, to something you were saying about this message that you got from the LinkedIn CEO and you repeating that and not really knowing, well, has this person heard that? Is that embodied within this sort of fabric of my team? It speaks to something that, I've seen at every organization that I've, worked with as a client and, within our team at PSC, which is the idea of like making sure that information is cascading properly. So, at a leadership level, you might be completely in sync on like, these are our priorities and this is how we're speaking about things and all that. And then, but how can you make sure that that information is disseminated properly to everybody who reports in underneath everybody else, in a way that it makes sense to do it. It doesn't feel pedantic. It doesn't feel forced. But the idea being that has to become woven into the sort of fabric of the company in order for it to, everybody to sort of follow along with that. So yeah, definitely a challenge.
Totally agree. The over communicating is probably the best way to tackle that. And then consistency over time with like updates. That's something I learned is, and that's managing up and that's managing with your team. However you're doing that, as long as you're like have a cadence or a rhythm, whether it's like every week we're doing this thing or every other week you're going to get this email. I think it can go a long way. Yeah.
And say to your direct reports, forgive me if I am repeating myself, but this is the only way.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard something, a good one just last week. In good teams, coaches hold players accountable, right? But in great teams, players hold players accountable.
Nice.
Right?
Love that.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a great one.
Yeah. I see what you did there. Cool. All right. Well, let's see. We might be heading down to the end here. Yeah, let's wrap it up. I think this has been a great conversation. I'd love for each of you just to kind of give, what's your parting wisdom. If you could tell yourself one thing at the beginning of 2024 that you wish you had kept an eye on this year at the beginning of the year, what would that have been? And in the spirit of, what maybe we can bring that in as a lesson for next year.
Wow, that's really hard.
It's a great question. I was saying the same thing. I was like, I don't have an easy answer for that one.
I didn't prep you for that one.
One thing that we would have paid attention, we hope we would have paid attention more to, you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, what do you wish you would have known at the beginning of this year that you later found out?
Geez. I don't know if I have a great answer for that, but my life has changed pretty dramatically professionally, because I was with Showtime for 24 years, and ultimately Showtime's owned by Paramount. We talked a little bit about downsizing and whatnot. So on to new opportunities. And I've been, really enjoying this, because I've been inside of a ton of different and new companies and new businesses, right? So some of them similar, but some of them, production spans, right? Different industries. So, and operations, of course. So I guess I was probably in the beginning of the year, I was more stressed out about, I've got to find a home, back to what's comfortable, let's get back to what's comfortable. But I've actually, I wish I would have told myself then, like, relax. It's all going to be really for the right reasons and all the right things that you're going to find your path. So for me, it was more of a personal kind of professional thing.
Yeah. Cool.
It's a great answer. I would say I probably underestimated. I talked about it a lot, right? The pace of change.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I would say, and I would tell myself again in 25 and 26 and 2074, is change is the only constant. And I think I would just like remind myself and ground myself in that. It just goes a long way.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, I feel like we could cover a lot more ground, but I've taken up enough of your precious time. Thank you so much for joining, and hope to do this again sometime. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah,
Thank you.
My pleasure.